Welcome to this explainer, okay? We're diving straight in today because we are going to completely change how you look at writing long papers. We're going to stop treating long-form composition like it's some mystical abstract art form where you just sit around waiting for inspiration to strike. Instead, we're treating it as a rigorous exercise in structural architecture. Think of yourself not just as a writer, but literally as a master builder.
But first, let's address a huge pain point I know we've all experienced. Why do so many of these massive essays just seem to collapse under their own weight? You know that feeling. You're completely lost in the weeds of a 10-page paper, staring at a blinking cursor, wondering how on earth your paragraphs even connect. Well, it's almost always because you started building without a clear blueprint. You just started hammering sentences together, and frankly, that inevitably leads to a structural collapse.
So to fix this, we need a complete mindset shift. Longer essays absolutely require transitioning away from basic sentence mechanics and focusing on macro-level structural coherence. To go from laying individual bricks to framing a truly stable structure, we have to master three main areas. First up is the threshold, establishing your conceptual boundaries early on. Second is core evidence, synthesizing the literature with your real-world cases. And third, integrity, which means providing totally transparent documentation of your raw materials.
To get us there, today's site tour will take us through 5 critical phases of construction: designing the macro blueprint, pouring the theoretical foundation, erecting the core pillars, building the synthesis chamber, and finally installing the utility systems. Let's get to work.
Phase 1. Designing the macro blueprint. We're talking about the front, the body, and the back.
Before we pour a single drop of concrete, we've got to map out the broad zones of our construction site. Every stable, long-form essay is divided into 3 distinct zones. You have the front, which acts as your entryway or introduction. Then you've got the body, that massive load-bearing center housing your literature review and case study. And finally, the back, which is essentially the foundational, basement, and utility rooms reserved for your references and appendices. If any one of these 3 zones is missing or out of proportion, your whole building leans.
Let's step inside and actually build that entryway. Framing the front of your essay means pouring very specific conceptual boundaries using the 4-step funnel method: territory, niche, thesis, and signposting.
Think about it. A longer essay's intro has to do so much more than just randomly hook the reader. It is a functional roadmap. This scholarly funnel forces you to start really wide at the top with the broad territory of your research. Then, you narrow it down to pinpoint a very specific niche or gap. Right at the tightest part of the funnel, you deliver a firm, non-obvious thesis statement. And lastly, you explicitly signpost the upcoming structural sections. You are literally telling your reader exactly what rooms they are about to walk through.
All right, moving to phase 2, pouring the theoretical foundation through thematic synthesis.
With the front entryway framed, we move right into the body of the essay. And guys, here is where so many builders make a fatal error. A classic structural failure in academic writing is the dreaded, disconnected, serial summary. This is when you write, paper A said this, paper B said this, paper C said this. Honestly, it's incredibly weak timber. It would fail a structural inspection from pretty much any professor because it completely lacks connection. We need to upgrade from that weak timber to the reinforced steel of thematic synthesis.
Instead of those isolated summaries, which again are structurally unsound, you've got to build interlocking networks. You group scholars together into what we call conversational clusters. By organizing everything into Theme 1, Theme 2, and Theme 3 to form a solid base, you're making different papers interact and actually debate each other within those themes. That network is exactly what gives your literature review genuine, long-lasting structural integrity.
Phase 3, erecting the core pillars. Let's talk case studies and paragraph mechanics. Foundation is poured, awesome. Now it's time to raise the load-bearing walls by grounding all that abstract theory into concrete reality. We do this through your empirical case study. But to apply theory to a real-world scenario, you can't just dump a pile of data on the page. You have to follow a rigorous 3-stage framework: selection, contextualization, and application.
Let's trace this stepped framework. First up is selection. You have to justify exactly why this specific organization or event or whatever boundary you chose serves as a perfectly representative sample for your essay. Next, you step down to contextualization. You give us the necessary background information, but, and this is a huge but, without drowning your core analysis in pure, endless narrative description. Finally, you hit application.
This is where you directly map the literature concepts from your foundation right onto observed real-world behaviors or data points. This ensures your core evidence is firmly anchored down.
Now, drilling down even further to the absolute mechanical level, we really need to talk about the individual bricks making up those walls, your paragraphs. Every single paragraph in your main body must be tightly assembled using the PEAL method to sustain narrative momentum. PEAL stands for point, evidence, analysis, and link.
To construct a mechanically sound pillar, start with P, the point. That's your crystal clear topic sentence. The E brings in the evidence, your hard citations and data. The A is analysis, where you jump in and provide a critical evaluation of what that evidence actually means. And the L is the link, where the gears turn and physically connect everything back to your main thesis. Listen, if you treat every paragraph like a self-contained, interlocking mechanical pillar, your logical chain is never, ever going to break under scrutiny.
Phase 4. Building the synthesis chamber. Welcome to the discussion section.
Let's take the elevator all the way up to the penthouse to look out over the big picture. Keep this core concept in mind. The discussion is where you step back, you look at the entire landscape, and you interpret your findings rather than just stating them all over again. This is the room where you synthesize meaning. You've built the structure, you've showed us the data, but now you have to evaluate what your built structure actually achieved and what it means for the surrounding neighborhood of your academic field.
Think of this discussion section as a piece of heavy machinery, a true synthesis chamber. It takes in disruptive forces, which are all those unexpected abnormalities or wild counterarguments you stumbled upon during your research. You process them inside the chamber by really interpreting the implications of your case study. Below that, you define the boundary of limitations. This is where you have to honestly address the flaws or the limits in your own methodology. And finally, the chamber outputs clear, future directions, basically pointing a flashlight toward where the next builders in your field should focus their inquiry.
Finally, Phase 5, installing the utility systems. We're talking academic rigor and appendices. Look, before we can ever hand over the keys to the reader, or worse, the grader, we have to install the documentation systems. You have to treat academic transparency not as some hasty afterthought, but as essential, non-negotiable infrastructure. Precise in-text citations and end-of-text reference lists act as a totally reliable map of your research trail. They protect your academic integrity. Meanwhile, appendices act as an off-site storage safe. They house supplementary data, raw data sets, full interview transcripts, super complex diagrams, stuff that is absolutely necessary but would totally clog up the core narrative flow of your main body. You keep the main pipes perfectly clear by just referencing the appendix, but you store all that bulky data safely off-site.
And there we have it, the master blueprint. When you step back and look at it, you can see exactly how everything we discussed integrates perfectly together. You've got the funnel roof acting as this grand entryway. You have the interconnected conversational clusters forming a rock-solid foundation at the bottom. You have those incredibly sturdy PEAL columns holding up the floors of your case study framework. You have the synthesis chamber right up there in the penthouse, and running underneath it all the utility conduits for your references and appendices. By integrating all of these elements, you are left with a masterful, totally impenetrable academic structure.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one final thought. Mastering the long-form essay truly is just mastering structural architecture. Always, always remember to plan your blueprint before you pour a single drop of concrete. With these tools in your tool belt, I'll leave you with one final question. What kind of structure are you ready to build next? Thanks so much for joining me, and happy building!